In this video, we're going to be answering one of the questions that we've been asked a lot recently, which is how much does it cost to live in Mexico, and specifically how much does it cost to live in Guadalajara?
Welcome to Entrepreneur Expat. This is Justin. I'm Amanda. We're both digital marketers who've been in the space over 30 years collectively, and we're also expats who happen to be living in Mexico right now. So if you're interested in content about moving overseas, global diversification, and traveling all around the world while you run an online business, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single video. By the way, we have some really exciting news to share. So a few of our videos started taking off and our subscribers quadrupled in 24 hours. There's been an outpouring of support and questions from the community. So thank you so much. This started as a project for us, just answering questions, for our friends, our family, our colleagues who were interested in moving overseas and running an online business from anywhere. And we knew it was going to be popular, but we didn't know it was going to take off quite like that so fast. So thank you so much. And in celebration, what we've done is we've put together a couple of free gifts for you. So the first gift is for those of you who are asking us about all these questions about moving to Mexico. We actually put together a free guide for you to help you get started. And the second gift is for those of you who've been asking us a lot about online business. We are a big believer in the digital marketplace. We're big believers in having location independent businesses. We've each been doing it for 15 years. At this, then what we do is we help a lot of our clients really automate and systematize their online businesses. So we've put some of our favorite automations that can run 24/7, whether you're chilling at home or running all around the world, into a free guide for you as well. And you will find the links to both of those gifts below.
Right below this video. Grab them while you can. So back to the topic at hand, which is a lot of people in our community have been begging us to do a video on the cost of Mexico. A lot of you are in the US and Canada and have expressed concerns about the cost of living in your country. In fact, a recent study done by Smart Asset in February of 2024, which is the year we're currently in still, found that after surveying people in all 50 states, they looked at things like the cost of living per state, and the average family in California, for example, needs an income of $277,000. That's an income for two working adults raising two children. $277,000 just to live comfortably in California. In Florida, it's creeping right up there, $209,000 a year for a family of four. So things are getting a little crazy right now in the US, and Canada is not far behind.
The Florida one really shocks me because
She's from Florida.
I'm from Florida.
Yeah.
I'm from Miami, and I saw on Facebook there was a news article being shared around, and one of them said that the average rents in metropolitan areas in Florida are getting close to $3,000 a month.
That's just insane.
Which is insane. I mean, it's completely freaking crazy. So let's talk a little bit about cost of living in Mexico, because so many of you have been asking, and we've really been crunching numbers lately so we can bring this information to you guys. So take it away.
So to give you an idea, $3,000 a month, which is about what it would cost to rent, a one-bedroom house or so in Miami, is around what we pay.
Probably an apartment in Miami.
Yeah, well, one-bedroom apartment. That's about what we pay total for all of our personal expenses, and that includes rent, that includes meals out, that includes actually getting things like weekly massages, manicures, facials, all of the above, pampering, health insurance, pretty much everything. At the time of this recording, the Mexican peso, as we broke down a lot in another video about the election and a lot of the currency, right now, as of the time of this recording, we're at about 18.5 pesos per dollar. So because of that, the dollar goes a lot further here. And when you look at just the cost of everything, it's not only a lot less expensive here, but it's also much higher quality from what we have experienced in the US. And I don't know if you want to speak a little bit to that.
So one of the complaints that I have when I went back to the US is that for the first time, after living in Mexico for a while, is the first thing I immediately noticed was the poor food quality. in the United States. And in fact, many of the people that we've interviewed for this channel, we have interviews coming out soon with other expats, they tell me the exact same thing, that when they go to the US for the first time after living overseas for a while, literally the first thing they notice is how horrible the food is. So, it's kind of like you're getting a double whammy because number one, food in the United States is more expensive. So it's a lot more expensive.
We have friends that are paying $500 or $600 or more in just groceries. That's for one or maybe two people.
One person. I've seen people that they're a married couple. It's $1,000 a month for groceries. We tell that to our Mexican friends, and they're like, "That's insane," because food in Mexico is just cheap.
Yeah, there was a time during the pandemic when eggs were so much cheaper in Mexico. They were about a half or a third of the price. So people would actually smuggle eggs through the border in Tijuana and bring them to the U.S. That was a real thing. We gotta probably show some clips or something from that. But that's how much cheaper it is. And of course, things have stabilized a little bit since then. But every time we go out, maybe it costs what, $10 US a person for a pretty good meal?
Not even. It
like to go out to a restaurant,
yeah,
like a nice restaurant.
Like a nice restaurant, sure. But if it's like, I don't know,
$10 to $15 per person per meal for like a nice sit down restaurant.
That's like a really nice sit down restaurant. A lot of times, I mean, the both of us, sometimes we get meals for $5 each. So it can be, and then of course, there's like the $2 tacos. They're everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere. Or fruit's really cheap here, and really, really good. Guys, some of the best fruit I've ever had in my entire life is in Mexico. The mangoes, the pineapples, the everything. Everything is just delicious. And then you go back to the United States and you're like, what is wrong with this apple? Something is awesome with the apple.
Yeah, because it's not natural. It's not. I mean, you have to basically pay extra for organic things and basically pay them to not poison your food in the West, and that boggles my mind.
Yeah, and one thing that I noticed when I first got to Mexico that I thought was very interesting is I noticed, for example, in the Walmart, yes, to the Americans listening, there are Walmarts in Mexico. But one of the things that I realized was a lot of the food said, came from Mexico, or a lot of the things were made in Mexico. Whereas I remember being in a supermarket in Florida and looking at oranges, and it was like oranges from Brazil. And I'm like, huh? What? I don't understand.
But we make those here.
What are you doing here? Why are they coming from Brazil? Yeah. I don't understand. Now, I'm sure Mexico imports a lot of things as well in terms of food. They don't have everything here, but they have a lot. And that's one of the things I noticed was that a lot of the food actually came from Mexico, or a lot of the things are made in Mexico, and that's just not a common thing anymore in the United States, which I would assume has a lot to do with why food is so cheap, because it has to go less distance, there's less people to pay. And one thing that's really interesting, actually, particularly in Guadalajara, is in Guadalajara it has a history of like agriculture. So, for example, at least in our neighborhood, a lot of the people who live in this neighborhood come from families that had agricultural land. And a lot of times they get deals with American companies. And I had an interesting conversation with one of them who said, yeah, whenever we have the American contracts where we're shipping fruit over there, for example, we have to like add a bunch of extra stuff, basically, so that the fruit looks perfect for the American. And I was like, oh, that's weird.
A little bit, yeah.
That you would have to do that. Because, I guess, fruit in its natural state is not always very pretty. But when they had the American contracts, they had to go out of their way to make the fruit pretty, which I'm sure drives up the cost.
Well, not only that, but you're putting things into the food that probably shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
So when we take a look and just kind of break down all of the expenses, so let's start with housing, because that's probably the biggest expense. Tell them a little bit about what we get and what we get for our money here, and what you'd be able to get for that price, if anything, where you're from, for example, in Miami.
Yeah, so apparently for in Florida, now we're looking at almost $3,000 a month in housing in the big metropolitan areas. We're paying about a third of that for a house where we each have our own offices, and we have rooms for friends who stay with us when they want to visit Mexico.
So a little actually under $1,000 USD now around 17,000 pesos a month. We're in a nice neighborhood in Guadalajara. We have a 3-story house. We've got a basically garage / studio type of thing. I have like my workshop essentially downstairs, where I build furniture sometimes, and I do my little electric projects and things like that. We have that downstairs. We have a living area with table and TV and furniture and all that downstairs. We've got a kitchen, all normal stuff. Then on the second floor, we've got our offices. So like Amanda mentioned, we've got our own offices. Back here, there's a bathroom on the second floor as well, offices here for each of us. And then you go upstairs and we have a guest room. Oh, and there's our main room here on the second floor as well. That's a master bedroom with a bathroom. And then on the third, and we actually have 3 patios. So we've got kind of an inside area patio, like a little outside area that's between the other houses, and then we've got another patio right in front of our house, and we've got a small balcony, and then you go upstairs to the roof, and there's a guest room. We have a full like terrace, like where you can walk out on the roof and see all the buildings and the trees and everything. Super cool place to see like sunrises and sunsets and all that. And then a lot of roof area. I just actually set up a redundant power system with solar panels and routed all of our different internet cables, and we'll have to do another video about that, about how we deal with power outages and internet backups and all that, just in terms of infrastructure. That's going to be an upcoming video, but there's a lot of space. There's space for us. There's space for our dog and our cat.
We have a dog and a cat. So
very big dog, very small cat.
And I just want to be clear because part of the reason why the rent, first of all, this is one of the smaller houses in the neighborhood, because now that we've gotten to walk around a lot more and we've made a lot more friends in the neighborhood and we've been to other people's houses, we're like, dang, this is one of the small ones in the neighborhood. So that obviously makes the price go down. And then it was an older house. So we had to kind of we should
renovate
talk about. We had to okay, we should talk about this. This is important.
That's another video too.
This is another video, but I'm going to make a note of this. So in the United States, if there is an issue with your apartment or whatever, normally the landlord covers all the costs. In Mexico, they cover certain costs.
Sometimes, if they're nice.
If they're nice.
Yeah.
But they're not necessarily required to, so that's just something to keep in mind. But even with the renovation that we had to do, we actually had to rewire the electrical system. That's a great story. That's for another time.
We had Argentine contractors here for like 15 days, I think.
Yeah, that's a story for another time. But for those of you who are considering moving here, just know that a part of the housing might include that you're going to need to have a budget for things that you're going to need to fix, because it's different here than it is in the U.S. and
But
Canada,
still, even with all of that included, spread over a couple of years that we're going to be here, maybe it adds an extra $100 a month.
Yeah.
And that's only because we already knew what we were getting into, which was like an older house. We also have our office, our infrastructure. We wanted to make sure we had like good wiring for air conditioning and things like that, because being an older house, it just wasn't wired that well, and everything was also wired backwards. That's not normal. If you get like a newer apartment or a newer house, you're probably not going to have to deal with those issues. But to Amanda's point, the contracts are slightly different in terms of who covers what.
Yeah.
So you want to budget maybe 10% or so of your rent for that, depending on how old the house is. But you'll get a better deal if maybe there are some things that you'll have to fix in your tenancy there.
Also, if you're looking at newer buildings, then obviously the rent is more expensive. So multifamily is starting to become a thing here. Mm-hmm. Multifamily buildings, Canadians and Americans are very well accustomed to the multifamily thing. Now that's actually starting to become more of a thing here. So obviously if you want a brand new building with central AC and all that kind of stuff, then that is more expensive. But even still, because we were looking at some before we decided on the house, it was like, how many?
In the same neighborhood, like a 2-bedroom apartment, ranging between about like 12 and 1,500. And we got this house just at a really, really, really good deal. But we bought our own air conditioning units and got them installed.
Yeah.
You can do that here.
Yeah.
So
that's another thing, right? Is the older buildings do not necessarily have central AC. So what you do is you just buy...
Central AC isn't really a thing here.
No, central AC is not a thing.
You usually have like mini splits.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get too far.
Speaking of which, that's actually a really good segue into electricity costs.
Okay. So that's a good one. So there's one power company, at least that we're aware of in Mexico, that's like a nationalized electric company, and they're called CFE. And I actually have a calculator. Maybe we'll share that at some point as to here's what our electric bill is going to be based on what we're utilizing. And we track all of our energy costs through like smart plugs and smart meters and things like that I've installed in the house. But on average, so in the summer months, we just got our last bill. It was about 1,600 pesos, so a little under 100. We'll call it $100 US, depending on the exchange rate, and that was for 2 months. So you get the bill for CFE every 2 months for your electricity is about $100, so $50 a month. Bear in mind, we have our computers, we have our servers, we have lights for production. We also have 2 AC units running almost constantly, like one or the other in the room or in the office here. So even with all of that in mind, we only had about a $50 a month bill. In the off months, like before we were using any of the air conditioning, it was a lot less. It came to about $20 to $25 a month, which was really not bad at all. And now with the summer, it's just been super, super hot. So we have had that additional cost. We offset it a little bit with the solar, but really the solar was more just kind of backup for all of our things than anything, because sometimes there are relatively infrequent, but there can be some power outages and things like that.
Yeah, and then this year's bill in the summer might be higher than usual because this is an unusually hot summer. In Guadalajara, there were a couple of heat waves coming through Mexico. Typically, it's not this hot
Yeah.
in Guadalajara.
So the other main costs, we've got our internet cost. I'll add cell phones in here as well. For internet, we actually have 2 internets. You don't necessarily need that, but we've got 2. On average, without the promotion that we're currently on, they're going to be around, like for a very fast plan, that's around 500 megabits per second. We're paying around 700 to 800 pesos a month on the off promotion. So probably total for the 2 internets, about $100 a month. But again, we've got 2. You're only going to pay half that cost normally. We just happen to work from home and need internet that's up all the time. If we have an hour or 2 of outage, that costs a lot of money and that causes a lot of problems. So our internet can never be down. That's why we've got 2. They're both fiber. We have one from Mega Cable and we have another one from Total Play. And then we have a system that I engineered in the house that sets them up so that they're redundant. So if one goes down for more than a second or 2, and we're going to get more into detail on this in a separate video, but if one goes down, then the other one will kick in immediately without us having to do anything. So that's about $100 a month total for primary and backup internet.
Because we also have a Starlink as a backup.
We have a Starlink, but we're not paying for the subscription for it.
Yeah.
We do have a Starlink, but we just have it as like a just in case kind of tertiary backup.
Can you talk about the Starlink real quick? Because we do actually get questions about Starlink.
Yeah, so Starlink is cool and it's great. We have it mainly because we're going to be traveling a lot more. We're probably going to find a house at some point, like a second house near the beach, somewhere a little bit more remote, and or maybe in the mountains. So we want to have it so that if we do decide to travel, go somewhere for a couple months, we can just take that with us in the car or in a suitcase or whatever, and just have internet immediately that works really, really well. Starlink is actually super reliable. Never had any major issues with it. You have to drill a hole in the wall to get the cable through. But other than that, it's very easy to set up, and it was pretty affordable. We decided to go for the 2 fiber lines instead because we do a lot of video calls, and the latency was just lower on those. And per value, we got a better value with those fiber plans because we're in a city, and there's a lot of connectivity here, and they're pretty reliable. Like one of them will only go down maybe for an hour or so every week, and then the other one kicks on. So we've never had a downtime where both of the internets were down. Other than maybe occasionally a fault of myself trying to play around with our network more than I should be. But the Starlink is great. It was like $65 or so a month. And that's great if you're like in a rural area. It only gets about 100 megabits, maybe 150, which is still really, really good for satellite. But we were able to get around 500 for essentially 60% of the price. So we decided to just have that as a backup, and we can always activate it and deactivate it for a month as needed.
Oh, cell phones. Let's talk about cell phones. I think it would be good to talk about cell phone plans here in Mexico and then what you do with the American cell phone plan. These are like all the little things, by the way. I've been overseas for about a year, and these are like all the little tiny things in your personal life that you just don't even think about until you move to another country, and they're like, dang, bank accounts, cell phones, insurance, and all these little tiny things that you need to make adjustments to. So take it away on that one because
Yeah.
we actually significantly reduced our cell phone costs.
I like to optimize. That's the name of the game here. Is we're optimizing up and also optimizing down. Make more money, but also don't go and throw away money on stuff that you don't necessarily need. So we figured out how to get our phone set up in a way that makes a lot of sense and is super cost effective. So on average, between our plans here, we pay around 400 pesos per month, and we each have a plan on Telcel. 400 pesos is roughly 20 bucks US per month. In addition to that, so that gives us around 5 gigabytes of data, unlimited calls to and from the US, Mexico, and Canada. So if we wanted to call friends back home from our Mexican number, we could do that. Now, a lot of people ask, well, how do you keep your US number? Because it's really important to have a US number, not just something like a Google Voice, because Google Voice and other platforms that are free and that aren't a real plan can't necessarily get texts from banks and texts from other institutions in the US and the IRS and things like that. So what we had before is we had a T-Mobile plan, and that was about $70 US per month.
And that was for a plan that I think doesn't even exist anymore. It was like the T-Mobile
Yeah.
One plan, and it included
Unlimited data in the US.
unlimited data in the US, and I think it included data in and unlimited like text in like 100 something countries. So before we were actually living in another country, I should say before I was actually living in another country, I traveled a lot. Before the pandemic, usually around the US, but also traveled outside of the US. So I just had that T-Mobile plan, so I wouldn't have to worry about
Yeah, so when you
charges and things like
land,
that.
you can
Yeah.
get at least Maps or something or Uber in another country.
Yeah.
And if you are planning on traveling a lot and visiting a lot of different countries, maybe one of just the normal unlimited data plans from T-Mobile, they all include unlimited calling and texting. They include, like Amanda said, at least slow data in pretty much all of the countries. So when you land somewhere, at least you'll be able to use Maps or something else. Because we're not really traveling that much right now outside of the US and Mexico, we decided to actually switch that and just get a T-Mobile prepaid plan. And what we do is we use it as an eSIM. So our phones have our main line, which has got a physical chip from Telcel, and then we have the T-Mobile plan, which is on an electronic SIM. And what that does is it uses this Wi-Fi calling thing to get calls and texts from the US number using the data of the other chip that's local or whatever Wi-Fi network we're on. So we can actually make and receive calls on the US number exactly like we would on the Mexican number without any issue. And we actually went down from $70 a month to about $10 a month each on that. So that saved almost like $1,500, $1,400 a year or
Yeah.
something like that.
And then question, because we're going to start traveling again next year, most likely. So if we were to go to another country, what would we have to do in that case
Yeah.
if we don't have the T-Mobile plan that we had before?
So we're going to do a whole other video on that for sure in terms of the technology and how you get set up and how you make sure you're connected and all. But there's some really good plans from providers like GigSky. I've used them before. And you can actually get a GigSky eSIM. And basically, you can have as many eSIMs as you want. As far as I'm aware, maybe there's a limit, but it's probably at least 3 or 4. So you can have a few to juggle around as long as you don't have more than 2 of them active at the same time, depending on your phone. So you can get a GigSky eSIM for free, and then say you're going to the Caribbean or you're going to Asia or whatever, you can buy a plan for $25 or $30 a month that gives you those gigabytes of data in that country and still have your US phone number in the other electronic SIM slot. And what that'll allow you to do is travel and have the data that you need, but not have to have a fixed cost every single month for a bunch of data or a bunch of roaming or whatever it is that you're not actually using. So little tricks from about 15 countries in a couple decades now of traveling.
Okay, so now let's talk about something that I know is definitely on the minds of Americans and some Canadians, but I know this is definitely important for the Americans listening: healthcare costs and how health insurance works in Mexico. So healthcare costs, when I landed here about a year ago, he had me signed up for just about every doctor's appointment he possibly could, because we didn't know if we were going to be staying in Mexico or not at that point, our plan was just to be here 6 weeks, go back to the States, figure out what we're doing, and we ended up staying in Mexico. And in those 6 weeks, you had gotten me booked with dermatologists, just everything, just like everything imaginable. He had me booked because he was like, hey, you have to take advantage while you're here because it's a lot less expensive. And also, he takes very good care of me. But anyway, all of that to say, healthcare costs here are far less expensive, and it's also very good quality. So I'll let you talk about the insurance, but I'll just talk about my experiences so far.
With
So
like the pharmacies.
with the pharmacies and the
yeah.
doctors and the specialists and dentists and all that. Oh, and eye doctors. So I got sick a few months ago because we were on quite an adventure and we ate at a taco stand we probably shouldn't have eaten at.
And it was raining.
And it was raining.
Outside
It was a
of the
whole
city.
thing. It was
a bad
outside of
set
the city. It was
circumstances.
not a good set of circumstances. We rescued a dog. It's like a story for another time. And we got sick. We got food poisoning. And he went to the pharmacy up the street, which, by the way, we can walk to everything that we need to walk to. Pharmacies are one of them.
Yeah, for what we're paying here in rent times 3, in Miami, you would not live in a place where you could actually walk to like a pharmacy and a grocery store and multiple coffee shops and
Yeah.
restaurants and
Yeah, it's not that common in the United States. And actually, one of our commenters had said it's built that way on purpose in the United States. And it's one of the reasons it's difficult to be social in the United States. And it's to get people to buy cars, basically. Here it's
that's
different.
a whole other
That's a whole other thing.
story.
That's a whole other thing.
That's how LA was built. They were going to
Yeah.
build a whole big metro system in Los Angeles, but instead of doing that, they essentially got lobbied by the car manufacturers to build great big freeways instead, and we all know how that turned out.
So anyway, as I was saying about the pharmacy, he goes to the pharmacy. So for like minor things, like an infection, you got something in a stomach bug, like that kind of stuff, you can go to the pharmacy. They have a doctor right next to the pharmacy, and you pay like $4 for them to see you. And if you need medication, they'll prescribe it, and then you go to the pharmacy and they'll help you.
And they have it all there in
Yeah.
stock. You don't go there and like wait for somebody to call in your order and then get insurance to approve it, and then 2 days later they call you and from Walgreens and they say that your prescription is ready, and then you have to drive. Like, it happens within 15 or 20 minutes, the entire thing.
Yeah.
Like, including maybe 25 minutes if they're busy. The entire thing, from like walking into the pharmacy, paying for the doctor appointment, going there, seeing the doctor, getting the prescription for what you need, and walking out the door.
$4. One of the things, I went through like a detox of my nervous system in a year, we realized. And we realized like I was like detoxing from like being in constant stress in the US. And one of the things that always has Americans in constant stress is if somebody gets sick or something happens.
Or an animal gets sick.
Or an animal gets sick. But vets are like a whole other thing. They're not expensive either. I guess we can talk about vets as well. You're like in a constant state of like panic over how much it's going to cost and how much time it's going to take. I mean, I remember having a basic ear infection and then having to go to an urgent care. It was $250 and I was there for like 3 hours.
Just waiting.
And then I gotta go to the pharmacy anyway, which is not at the urgent care. So that would be one example. Another example, like you might remember the costs more than I can, but if you were to go to like a private practice of a specialist, which by the way, they're everywhere in Guadalajara, private practices, it's not something that's very common in the US anymore because most people in the US are now associated with hospital systems.
Yeah.
They're like big conglomerates now, but here it's still very common to go see a specialist at a private practice. So if you were to go get a consultation at a private practice for a specialist, what's it going to run you? I'm sure it depends on
For a private specialist, and again, this is probably like a higher end neighborhood as well. So depending on where you live, it might actually even be lower. But I think for your appointments, it was on average between about $40 and $50 US.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then
but that's not like a copay. That's not like, hey, you're paying $400 a month for insurance or $200 with Obamacare
like
or whatever, but then you
400
pay a copay of $50.
And then you
that's
get
the entire appointment.
And then you get a bill in the mail
Yeah.
like 6 weeks later being like, hey, so the insurance covered this much, but not this much. That's not a thing here.
Yeah, no, that's like cash you pay, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an example. Prescriptions, it depends on the prescription. That varies country to country. So we're not going to go that deep into that. Eye doctor, this is actually really great. A lot of it, someone else brought this up in the comments. They are Mexican and they're like, yeah, also in Mexico, people do services to the house. One of those services is house calls.
For eye doctors.
For eye doctors, which I didn't
even.
We didn't even know you could do that. There's a way of doing it. So, they can do house calls. You have access to their WhatsApp. So everything lives and breathes off of WhatsApp in Mexico, and I would venture to say probably most of Latin America. Just what everybody lives and dies by WhatsApp. And you can have your WhatsApp, and if there's an issue with your prescription, if you're waiting for x-rays, like you just WhatsApp your doctor. That's it. When was the last time you heard of having your doctor's cell phone number in the United States? I don't remember a time that was ever even a thing.
No. In
the United States. So it's not just less expensive, it's also really good quality, high-touch care. In terms of dental, I got a retainer. I had to get a retainer redone, a cleaning, and I had 3 fillings that I needed done, and the whole thing cost me less than $300 USD. If I were to get the retainer done in the United States, it would have been at least $800.
Yeah.
Just for the retainer.
Yeah, and a single filling maybe is only $40 of that or so.
Yeah.
Depending on what the peso's at, but it's less than 25%. Of what you pay on average.
And then for those of you who have pets, we'll talk about the pets as well. That's also not stressful at all here in Mexico. Our little cat Mia, we just adopted a 5-pound cat who's a rescue. And we've had to, because she's getting her vaccines and stuff like that, we've had to go to the vet a few times. She ate something she wasn't supposed to because she's a little scavenger and got sick. And you're in and out in like less than an hour. And each appointment has cost us maybe on average 30 USD. The last one was a little bit more because they were doing all the blood work and stuff like that to have kind of like a baseline. But even that only came out to like 100. Yeah,
that was it.
I hope this answered a lot of your questions about cost of living in Mexico, and particularly Guadalajara, which is where we are. Some cities are more expensive than others, but this is what we've got going on in Guadalajara. If you guys have any recommendations for future videos, please leave them in the comments below, and we will do our best to get to them as quickly as possible. We're trying a once-a-week schedule here to answer all of your questions. Do not forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. Share it with a friend who wants to start living the expat life. And if you're interested in moving to Mexico, do not forget to download our Moving to Mexico guide. You can find all the links to all that stuff below, and we will catch you guys on the next one.
See you next week.